Hey everybody, this is Rafe Telsch, and this is episode 40 of Have Not Seen This, a weekly in-depth look at a much-beloved movie, selected specifically by our guest, that they're a little surprised when they find out people have not seen. Hope everybody's having a good week out there, as usual. It's kind of interesting doing two different podcasts for me because of the different nature of the two podcasts. In this podcast, I interview people, and then I record a solo intro and outro, and there you go. And my other podcast, I have a co-host, and I'm bouncing things off of him. I'll sometimes have a different experience recording the podcast than this one. So I had a couple of epiphanies while I was recording this week's episode of my other podcast, Citizens of Azeroth. One, with all of the stuff that's going on in the world, my response has been creatively to kind of shut down. I had a bunch of episodes of this recorded back in late March and early April, and my bank of episodes has pretty much evaporated at this point. So I'm still going to have episodes, but I'm not as far ahead in planning them as I would like to be, and I really need to find time to sit down and watch some movies and have some interviews with people so that I can put them up here on the show. And I'll be taking care of that, so don't worry, there won't be any episodes missing. But that means, like, next week, I don't know what the episode's going to be quite yet. I have a couple of contenders. It'll just be what I actually get to schedule and record. Secondly, despite the fact that every week for the past month, I have been talking on this show about the importance of getting involved and participating in what's going on, and the fact that I've been sitting back and trying to listen and educate myself, somehow I never said the phrase Black Lives Matter on this podcast. And I feel like that's important for me to address. I feel like I've addressed it over the past couple of weeks, but I've never said the actual phrase. So just to be absolutely clear, I do stand with the protesters. I do stand with those who are seeking racial equality because I do believe Black Lives Matter. So in case there was any ambiguity around that, that should clear it up. As I said, I've kind of shut down somewhat creatively, and moving the show to another day of the week to try and contend with my schedule, which has been absolutely ridiculous lately. I forgot to put out a Friday inquiry last week because by the time I realized it was Friday, it was actually Sunday. So no Friday inquiry to go over for last week's movie, which is a shame because I had a good topic picked out, but we'll come up back to it at some other point, I'm sure. But don't forget to follow us on social media. Have Not Seen This on Twitter. Have Not Seen This podcast on Facebook, so that when I do remember to put out Friday inquiries, you can sound off and have your voice heard and hopefully read here on the show. So this week we are turning to Warcraft, the 2016 video game adaptation film directed by Duncan Jones. And the guest this week is Luke Kunka. And if that last name sounds familiar to you, then it's because his brother, Alex, was the guest on episode 28, where we discussed the secret life of Walter Mitty and had a really heartfelt conversation about a drama/comedy that really connected with me and the point that I'm at here in my life. Back when I watched it, and even now as I'm trying to make some changes to my life. Warcraft doesn't exactly have that same connection. It's not as in-depth a conversation, but it is still a really good conversation. And I do try to compartmentalize it just a little bit so that we do talk about the film in a way that is open to people who are not familiar with the Warcraft universe. But the truth is, we get into the Warcraft conversation pretty in-depth as far as lore and the story and how the film changes that story from what's been represented in the video games and novels and the other things that Blizzard have put out prior to this film. Regardless, it's a great conversation about a movie that's a lot of fun, even if it doesn't stay 100% true to its roots. So here we go with this week's conversation, Warcraft from 2016. Yeah, so I have to guess you're a World of Warcraft fan as well?
Yeah, that's a pretty easy guess.
Yeah, kind of the here's your sign moment, I guess.
Right.
What do you play?
I am currently playing a level 60 warrior in the classic server Fairbanks.
Oh, classic. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So what made you go to class? Are you playing retail at all, or just classic? And what made you decide that to go that direction?
I have played a grand total of maybe 10 minutes in retail since Classic has launched. And I guess the reason why I chose Classic is because I just wanted to relive 2005, 2006, 7 a little bit.
Okay, yeah, I played that when it was live, and I have zero interest in going back to it.
Oh man, I have zero interest in playing retail, really. Maybe when Shadowlands comes out, I'll dive back in for a couple weeks or whatever. But I'm pretty on board for Classic, and I'm ready for TBC Classic.
Gotcha. So, what are you? So you've hit level cap, right? That's level 60.
Yes.
So what do you do now?
Level another alt. I leveled a shaman to 60 also, so I could get some alchemy stuff going and herbing. And just been farming gear, getting ready for AQ40 to come out, which comes out in 3, maybe 4 weeks.
So you're one of those dirty horde.
Oh, of course.
So have you been playing Warcraft from the beginning?
My first experiences with Warcraft was Orcs and Humans on PC. I
Oh
don't know.
wow,
Yeah, forever ago. I have the original jewel case and everything.
the very beginning then.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. So when the Warcraft movie was announced or finally came out, I'm guessing that was right up your alley then.
Oh, for sure. I believe the launch trailer with Duncan Jones came out on stage. Me and my brother were actually at BlizzCon for that.
Oh, how nice. I still want to go to a BlizzCon. Obviously, I wouldn't want to go this year, even if they were holding it. But I hope to go at some point.
It's a great time, especially for anyone who's a fan of any of the games.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. So, do you play other Blizzard games as well, or is it just mainly Warcraft?
I dabble a little bit in Heroes of the Storm here and there. I played D3 for a while, but I haven't touched it in a little bit too. I've done a little StarCraft as well. I've played pretty much all their IPs to some extent, but the level of interest just hasn't kept me anything close to what WoW has.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So, on the movie side, what kind of movies are your thing? What do you normally go for that isn't necessarily related to Blizzard products?
Well, if we just dive into your little history here of your show, I'm a big fan of Alien and Predator movies. I was raised on those when I was barely old enough to talk. Um, Also Willow, big fan of that movie too. A lot of the action adventure sci-fi stuff. I obviously was named after a somewhat important character in a Star Wars franchise kind of thing.
Oh, see, that's your namesake.
Yeah, I had a dad who's pretty interested in all that.
I grew up next to a family whose last name was Walker, and they were having another child. This was in the late 70s, early 80s. And for a brief moment, if it was a boy, they were considering naming it Luke, middle name Sky. So it would
Oh
be
no.
Luke Sky. Yeah, yeah, I thought it was awesome at the time. I also was, like 8.
Oh geez. Yeah, I can see how that would be good for the dad and a lifelong torment for the child.
So we had your brother on the show, and he chose The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Is that a movie you like? Is that up your alley as well, or is that different tastes between siblings?
I was actually the one that got him to go see that movie. The trailers and stuff have been shown on TV or online or whatever, and I was like, "Hey, Ben Stiller movie. He's not a terrible person I hate, so I mean, let's go check it out, see what it's all about."
Gotcha. Well, I thank you for that then, because he and I had a great conversation about that movie. So
Yeah, it was one of those movies that after we left the theater, my mind kind of exploded because of the journey that one individual person had taken. And then it was a little while after that where Alex was like, "You know what? I actually agree with you. That was a really good movie."
so you're taking credit for Alex there.
Oh, 100%.
So the concept of the show is have not seen this. We talk about movies we're surprised people haven't seen. What are your have not seen this movies?
I actually thought about this a little bit. Let's see. We'll go with Bruce Willis's Die Hard. Had never seen that one.
You've never seen Die Hard? Really?
Oh, no, not even
Oh.
once.
See, that opens the door for someone to come on and talk Die Hard now, though. So I'm thrilled about that. But really?
Yeah. I also never seen Exorcist or Pet Cemetery, either version, or A lot of the Stephen King movies, actually.
Okay.
I did see Misery. That was a good one.
Exorcist is still one of the scariest movies I've ever seen. Like, I still hold it in high regard just for being fucking terrifying.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't think you're missing much on the Pet Sematary front. I haven't seen the remake yet, but the original, it's fun, but it's campy fun. It's not as terrifying as the story is.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, it could be something I would watch on a whim. I saw the movie that I think is The Green Room not too long ago. That was a weird and interesting movie.
That was another one that I had somebody talk about doing for the show, and they've disappeared, and so I haven't seen it yet. That's with Patrick Stewart? No, not Patrick Stewart. I'm trying to remember.
I actually think it was Patrick Stewart.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, it is. He plays
the bad guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to see that, and then the guest disappeared. So I guess I could always just watch a movie on my own. I guess not for the podcast.
Yeah, it's a really, really weird and interesting movie.
I've heard that, but I've heard really good things about it too.
Oh, it's pretty good. The effects and stuff in it were really fantastic.
Oh, cool. Well, we're here today to talk about Warcraft from 2013, which ties in very neatly with what we talked about as far as your gaming habits there. This is directed by Duncan Jones, written by Charles Levitt and Duncan Jones, starring Travis Fimmel, Paula Patton, Ben Foster, Dominic Cooper, Toby Cabell, and Ben Schnetzer.
For years, our world has been at peace. But something is coming. I can feel it. Dark forces are upon us.
Find these beasts, or whatever they are.
Our world is dying. There is nothing to go back to. If our people are to survive, we must make a home here. Whatever happens.
Whatever happens. If we do not unite, our world will perish.
This doesn't need to happen. There is one who may help us.
For orcs, there is no other life but war. No, but with the humans' help, there could be.
Why are you here?
To save our people.
Can we trust him?
They're beasts. They should all be destroyed.
Are you sure about that? We'll protect the kingdom. You and I.
You side with the humans against your own kind.
This is suicide.
We have no choice. We should attack with full force.
Whatever you plan to do it now!
So I kind of want to compartmentalize the conversation a little bit. So my first question is always, how do you describe this to someone who hasn't seen it? But I want to ask you, how do you describe this to someone who hasn't seen it, who isn't familiar with the world of Warcraft? How do you sell that person on seeing this movie?
I would say it's a high fantasy movie in which an opposing force that is brand new to this world tries to come and take it over because their world is dying, and there's some good, some bad on both sides, and it's an interesting struggle for control of the world, or at least the area, the zone.
Gotcha. So that's really interesting. I like what you said about some good, some bad on both sides, because that's one of the first things that struck me about this movie. I did see this in theaters. This was my first chance really revisiting it since it was in theaters in 2013.
Has it been that long?
I know, right? But my first, 2016.
Okay, yeah.
But my first note was that we start from the perspective of the orcs. You know, it is essentially setting up this storyline of the humans versus the orcs. but we start from the perspective of the orcs and we start to sympathize with the orcs, where another fantasy movie would just set the orcs up to be the bad guys and have us just associate with the humans.
Yeah, I think that was a really strong move on Duncan Jones's part, because you got to set up the characters that are, I guess, the race of beings that the viewers probably don't. Well, let's be honest. Most people that saw this movie were the gamers. Maybe the people who play the games didn't really know the history behind the orcs and why they came to Azeroth. They just knew that they came through a portal in the ground somewhere, and they're trying to kill everybody.
Yeah, well, so that's my other side, is how do you sell this to someone who has seen the movie, or not who hasn't seen the movie, but how do you sell this to someone who is familiar with World of Warcraft or the previous Warcraft games?
I think you have to go along the route of the World War Z theory, where just go in and watch it, don't compare it to the books, and you'll have a good time.
So were you familiar with these characters and this story before you saw the movie?
Oh, 1,000%. The whole time watching the movie, my girlfriend sat down and watched it with me. I was doing the actually guy to a lot of the inconsistencies between the lore and the movie.
Yeah, when I rewatched this, I rewatched it with my girlfriend, and I was trying really hard not to be that guy, because
So
they
hard.
do take such tremendous liberties with the lore in a lot of places. And the one part that I just couldn't resist was Garona killing Lane. I was just like, no, I gotta address this. I gotta talk about how this happened. Which I found interesting on IMDb, where there's like this, trivia and stuff. They call it in the original timeline, and they treat this almost as if it's like the Star Trek reboot, where you have the original timeline, which is the Kirk and Spock and everybody we grew up with,
And then the Kelvin timeline.
And then the Kelvin timeline. They were treating this movie almost that way, whereas there's the original timeline, which is World of Warcraft and the books and all that kind of stuff, and then this movie is an alternate timeline.
But, I mean, the things they changed, the stuff that was originally in there was just so good. Like how Durtan dies and Draka dies, and all the stuff with like Orgrim and just Blackhand and just the orcs in general. There's so much strong stuff on their side from the original lore that they didn't really need to change anything.
Yeah, no, but they did. So, and I definitely have one change we'll talk about in a little while. There's one change that really bothered me, that again, I kept my mouth shut. I wasn't the actually guy, but it was a change that I was just like, no. So what is your history with this movie? Like, you said you saw the trailer. You think it was at BlizzCon when it was released, that was the year you were there. But
Right.
as far as actually seeing the movie, what's your history with it?
Oh, I saw it in the theaters opening night, if not opening weekend for sure. I have it on 4K on Apple TV that I watched the other night, and still love the visuals of it.
So even though it does take liberties with the story, that's not enough to pull you away from it. You still really like this.
Oh, I mean, the CGI of the orcs in general, just that kind of CGI is unparalleled. It's along the lines of the Blizzard cinematics, where you can see and read facial expressions so well that there's no mistaking what they're thinking or how they feel or anything like that. And also the spell effects and just the visuals are just so stunning. The landscapes and all that. Stormwind in general.
Yeah, and I didn't notice it the first time, but on this rewatch, I really felt like they were going through locations that I knew from playing the game, but they paid tribute to the locations in the game without being beholden to them. That they could represent Elwyn Forest without a gamer going, well, that tree is out of place, or that kind of stuff. It's like it brought the feeling of it without feeling like they were slaves to recreating it on the screen.
Exactly. They gave the world more substance. So if you're playing it in a game, the distance between Stormwind and Goldshire would take you hours to run to. But in the game, it's just a few feet outside the gates, really.
Right. And I felt that a lot more watching the movie this time, that it's like, oh, wait, okay, so now I've got my bearings. Okay, so they're in this area and this is happening here. And yeah, in game, that's going to take me 5 minutes to get there. But in a really fleshed out world, that's completely different.
Yeah, the sense of scale was fantastically done, I think.
Yeah. And I agree with you on the orc CG. I think the visual, the way they chose to portray the orcs, because I don't think I would have gone with CG as my default. That's how to do it. I think I would have gone practical with makeup, but did end up really liking the way that they do it. I didn't like it so much for the dwarves, what limited picture we have of the dwarves. Although that did make them feel more like Warcraft dwarves than, say, Lord of the Ring dwarves.
Right, yeah, they definitely felt more a part of the Warcraft world in general than, say, Gimli. If you put Gimli in the Warcraft, you'd be like, this is kind of weird. It doesn't seem to fit as well.
Yeah. And I felt like they did make it their own. I just didn't think the CG was, I don't know, it looked like CG as opposed to the orcs where it kind of, it felt natural to this universe.
That could have also been a thing where they knew the dwarves weren't going to be super big with screen time, so they didn't put as much focus as they did into, say, Orgrim or Durotan or Draka or any of the other main character orcs that are going to get a lot of screen time.
Oh, I agree. In fact, the first scene that you have with the dwarves, really only out of two, but they're in Ironforge, and that scene's totally extraneous. There's absolutely no reason for it to be in Ironforge except for it being a bit of fan service, showing the fans a part of the world, but it doesn't fit in the story that they're telling here.
Yeah, but I mean, even as a Horde player, it was still badassy in Ironforge, being all lit up with the lava and everything.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's quite a bit of fan service in this movie, and there's a part of me that's bothered by that, but the truth is this is a movie for those fans, so it only makes sense that there would be so much fan service.
Oh, for sure. And especially for the Chinese audience, which, let's be honest, made, 500 million over there versus the sub 100 over here in the US?
Yeah, it's ridiculous how much it did there. It wasn't well received here, and that's for sure. It sits at a 28% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 32% on Metacritic, making it one of the lower rated movies that we've looked at on this show. And as usual, I pulled a positive and negative review just to kind of give some focus. Both of them hit on things that I really felt while I was watching the movie as well. The positive review comes from Manola Dargis from the New York Times, who writes, Mr. Jones doubles down on the action, though without any real shocks or awe, but he also modestly complicates the question of the monstrous. The orcs in Warcraft prove somewhat more psychologically complex than any number of cartoon Hollywood villains. They're sincere for one, and they're generally better company than the king and his crew. It says something about Mr. Jones's choices that he gives Durotan so much screen time, and Mr. Kebble, with the help of special effects wizards, makes good use of that time with a nuanced, moist-eyed turn that evokes old studio gladiators like Victor Mature. Durotan is a beautiful brute and all the more human for it.
Well, that's the thing, though. The orcs are such a noble and honorable race that they can't, well, for the exception of Gul'dan, who's a big old meanie, the orcs, they can't really, do anything overly disgusting, like commit war crimes and stuff, because they're bound by honor and a code, whereas the humans they can lie and cheat and backstab and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I as I said, you start with the orcs and you start gaining sympathy with them, and he is trying to show good and bad on both sides, but I almost feel like he succeeds more on the orc side than on the human side, because I almost feel like the human characters are, I don't know enough about them. And being that actually guy, as you talked about, I had to explain to my girlfriend that it's Anduin Lothar, and that's where the name Anduin comes from. And they refer to him as King Lane throughout the entire movie, but it's like, no, that's Lane Rin. That's Varian's father. Right. You know, and you do get that moment where he says goodbye to tiny little Varian. So you do, and again, I feel like that's a moment of fan service thrown in, especially since they haven't used his last name. But like the Queen, we never even get her name on screen.
Yeah, there's so much other stuff they could have put in. I think Duncan Jones himself said he had to cut about 40 minutes of the film, or his director's cut would have been 40 minutes longer because of all the extra stuff that they need to put in there, or that he had to remove, like the war with the elves and the trolls that he had originally wanted in there, which would have been so cool to see.
Yeah, because we don't even see trolls in this version of the film.
Not even once, and that's really upsetting.
Yeah, we were talking about how you don't even see all of the primary races from Warcraft. You see the Draenei, but they're withered and imprisoned. And they're not even a primary Warcraft race if you really go back to Classic.
Yeah, right.
But you don't see trolls, you don't see Tauren, you don't see gnomes. The last is kind of understandable because, gnomes have never been very cinematic focused. I mean, Blizzard has usually not even used them in the cinematics that they use to promote each expansion until more recently.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
So on the negative side, Will Leitch for the New Republic writes, one of the many irritating aspects of Warcraft is that it plunges you into its world without much care or concern. There is no nod to newcomers, the movie just starts. Orcs, humans, griffins, I think, and a stray elf or two begin talking in a stilted cadence about even more creatures you haven't met yet. Good movies mete out information carefully, trusting that if you don't quite get what's going on, you'll catch up as you go along. Warcraft betrays that trust, never establishing much of anything. You'll constantly feel like you walked in late. I don't remember the last time I was so utterly mystified about what was unspooling in front of me.
Yeah, I agree with that. If you don't really have any former history or anything with the lore of Warcraft, you're not going to recognize any of these names. You're not really going to know what's going on. You'll just see that there's green orcs and brown orcs that are going through a portal and they end up in human lands for some reason.
Yeah, and I think actually that review was the one that pointed out that some of the orcs were green and some of the orcs were brown, and there didn't seem much reason behind it, which, as players of the game, we know that the reason behind it is the green ones are imbued with the fell energy, which is, kind of at the heart of the movie. But I don't feel like, I mean, almost they make sure to explain it when the baby is born and he drains the soul of the nearby person and puts that energy in the baby, and the baby turns green, even though both of its parents are brown. But it almost isn't overt enough with that to help the newcomer to the Warcraft universe.
Hey man, show Baby Thrall a little more respect. Come on.
Well, I mean, the way they do that, it's almost like they're trying to make that a twist that it's Thrall.
Yeah, they don't really have a name for him or whatever until the very last 2/3, I guess, of the film.
Yeah, and then it's Goel, and there are a lot of people out there who don't even know that Thrall is Goel, because in World of Warcraft, I think he's only been referred to as Goel by Agra. I think almost nobody else has ever referred to him by that name.
Yeah, those people didn't play Cataclysm at all.
True. In Cataclysm, Agra was like every 5 minutes calling him Goel, but
Yeah, and Thrall went on a big soul search and was like, oh, I guess I'm this guy now.
that's true. Okay. But so, I mean, the complaint is that this isn't really accessible to people who aren't already familiar with Warcraft. What do you think about that?
I think that would definitely explain the sales or ticket sales in the China versus US. Around this time, Warlords of Draenor was real big in China, and they had a couple million players over there or something, and it wasn't as big in the US because it started dwindling down after Wrath.
That's true. I didn't think about it coming out. That's actually a really interesting idea that it came out the same time as Warlords, because it does feature some of those same characters.
Yep. If you notice, when the portal is going down towards the end, and it switches from Draenor bringing the orcs in to Stormwind, when Medivh sending them through the portal, you see Kargath Bladefist in the background. And I believe Hellscream's in numerous scenes. It just doesn't get mentioned by name ever.
Yeah, I wouldn't recognize Hellscream on sight, but I did about 75% of the way the movie think, shouldn't he be in this?
Oh, Hellscream's in a lot of the prominent scenes, especially around the Fell campfire where Blackhand loses his hand. Hellscream has his pretty notable single leather pauldron, and you can't really tell, but he has his axe with him too, the Gorehell.
Okay, so it's just, I see, even as a player who is familiar with the game, I'm missing stuff watching the movie.
Oh, I'm so big. I read most all of the older books. Basically, I've read all the books from the Warcraft 1 timeline, Warcraft 2, and then a little bit into Warcraft 3. So I'm pretty familiar with a lot of the characters and their arcs up until that point. And then after that, it's pretty much all through the games where they have the ending of their stories.
So you're that familiar with the lore, but it didn't bother you that they changed the lore so much for this?
See, that's where you're wrong, because it did, but you just gotta learn how to turn off your brain and just kind of enjoy things every now and then.
So it doesn't bother you now that they changed the lore that much for it, I guess I should say.
No, not particularly as much. It's just you go for the visuals, you go for the really, really beautiful animation and CGI and spell effects and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, some of it is really neat. Like, I like how they portray Khadgar. Different than what I imagined with Khadgar, but I really like the performance there. I really like Ben Foster's performance as Medivh as well. But I like this idea of this kind of fledgling wizard Khadgar who's trying to do the right thing and has therefore removed himself from the mage organization because he feels like they're not going to permit him to do things the right way.
Yeah, that's exactly how it went down in the book. He was part of the Kirin Tor for a while, and then actually, I don't believe he quit the Kirin Tor in the book, but Medivh summoned him specifically because he sensed his magical prowess, and basically brought him on as like a steward or a Padawan or whatever.
Yeah, he was an apprentice.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I mean, that's a pretty dramatic change that in the original history, he's an apprentice to Medivh, and here he's not only not an apprentice, but there's almost an instant adversarial relationship as Medivh recognizes his power.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, he says several times, "You are not the guardian yet."
Yeah, I think Medivh is a little salty about that.
But I mean, you know, I do like the way they're presented specifically because I like the way their magic is presented. And that's I wish mages in the game were as cool as these two are in the movie.
Oh, if you think the ones in retail are cool, you should look at the mages in Classic. They got some really nice spell effects and animations there.
No, I don't. That's the thing is I've never been able to key into Warcraft's idea of mages. It's never really sat well with me. It's always felt too limited. And like, that's one of the things I like about the depiction in the movie is they feel like masters of the arcane arts, kind of like Jaina does in the cinematics that Blizzard releases. She's not a frost mage. She's not a fire mage. She's a freaking mage and she can do all of it.
Yeah. That's kind of the thing though. Khadgar was such a novice at the time. He didn't really have a whole lot of the grasp on the magic, so maybe that's why he's portrayed so weak or kind of one trick, really.
Yeah, and I mean, as I said, I like that performance. I really like Ben Foster as Medivh, and I'm a huge Ben Foster fan. And it's funny because he's almost not recognizable. Like if you know Ben Foster from like the X-Men movies, where we were talking after we finished watching the movie about what a terrible treatment he's gotten through the X-Men movies because he was in X-Men 3 and X-Men Age of Apocalypse, which are arguably the worst of the entire X-Men franchise. But those are the ones he's been in. But if you know him from those movies, you're not going to recognize him here.
I think the first time I saw him was actually in that movie Parabellum or something. It's like a space kind of Dead Space looking movie where he just kind of wakes up and he's in the middle of space and there's no one alive or around. It's a really creepy, dark movie you should check out maybe.
I've heard of that, but I've not watched it yet. I will definitely check that out. I know him from like, what is it, Big Trouble with the Tim Allen movie he's in it and it's like him and Zooey Deschanel playing kids. Because, you know, they are kids.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I've never even heard of that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's going back quite a ways. It easily had to have been one of his first roles. But it's so funny to see how far he's come from that point.
Oh, for sure. How did you feel about the other characters' kind of portrayal, or other actors' portrayal of their characters, specifically Lothar and Garona?
All right, so Lothar, I like the performance, although I found it a little too stoic. Like, I don't feel like he's hard to read. He's almost detached from everything. And
really?
Yeah, I didn't feel like, I don't know. That's just the feeling I got from it is I didn't feel like, I felt like he was kind of a warrior, warmonger, and that was really the only thing that brought passion out. And I mean, I liked the scenes between him and Ruth Negga, who plays his sister, who's the queen. But part of that, again, is just because I kind of like Ruth Negga. But I didn't feel like Lothar was really that interesting a character.
I feel like he was not stoic enough, to be honest. I feel like he was way too much of a kind of a comic relief at times, and that just seemed a little unnecessary in certain scenes.
Interesting. Okay. Garona, I love. I love the way she's depicted here. There was one scene with her that kind of bothers me where it's doing.
Can I guess it?
Yeah, sure.
Is it the one where she is in the throne room and Lane's like, "Hey, we're gonna give you freedom if you help us," and she kind of looks over at him like that weird look on her face, like she doesn't know whether she wants to cry or scream or something. It's just such a weird look.
No, it wasn't that one. It was more the building the rapport. It's when she visits Lothar in the prison. When Lothar's the one who's imprisoned, it's kind of the flip of the earlier scene.
Yeah,
and for some reason, that scene just didn't work for me at all. But I liked Paula Patton as Garona. It did bother me. I already alluded to it earlier. It did bother me that they change how she kills Lane.
Right. Yeah.
Because I felt like that's such an important part of her story. And they completely alter it with a different context.
Right, because in the original lore, she is actually an assassin who assassinates Lane in Stormwind while it's burning. That's another big difference they changed. Stormwind is actually lost and sacked and razed at the end of the first war.
Right, and then they retreat to a whole nother city that they would have to have introduced in this movie. So I understand them not going that route. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like a very direct threat to the humans.
They did have some inklings. There are representatives of Lordaeron at that meeting with the elves and the dwarves towards the middle of the movie.
Yeah.
Lothar actually leads whoever's left over from Stormwind being burned to the ground up to Lordaeron, and that's kind of where his story gets a little bit more spicier.
Right. You mean in the original history?
Yeah, in the original history.
Yeah, I was going to say, because there's no, I mean, yes, there's, I mean, that meeting of the different forces, like I assumed Gilneas was probably in there too, but I didn't see any representation of them. I mean, I just assumed that they're there.
I don't know if Gilneas had any kind of representation in the movie.
No, I didn't see any in the movie, but in the original history, I would assume that they were there.
Yeah. If I remember right, there are a lot of people. Admiral Proudmoore was there for Gilneas.
Yeah, that was a detail that I really dug, is when he when the king points to the map on the ceiling of the throne room.
Oh, sorry, not Gilneas, Coltyrus. Gotta get my lore right, and my brother's gonna throw it back at me.
I loved that detail when he points to the map on the ceiling and Coltyrus is there on the map. And I mean, it's, for me, it wasn't because, growing up with World of Warcraft, well, back in Classic and Burning Crusade and that kind of stuff, that didn't exist on the map.
Right. Yeah. Just the map in general is really cool, seeing how it's portrayed in the movie versus what we know from the games and all that.
Right. So it was neat to have that. I like that was, and again, that's kind of a fan service to have a giant map there, but I liked it as well. And I loved the fact that I noticed Coltyrus there.
Hello, all of you fantastic listeners. I'm Erica.
And I'm Billy.
And we're the hosts of Martinis in the Macabre,
a comedy podcast discussing morbid murders, mysteries, and mayhem.
No, you don't understand. I was going to try and eat a little bit of her.
I was going to hit
Just
her.
a nibble.
Do you like true crime?
She killed him and cooked him. Do you wonder about morbid history?
What are you doing with that hammer?
Do you laugh at inappropriate topics?
Open mouth, cut off top of head, and insert both feet and hands.
Then we cordially invite you to our cocktail hour, so you too can build up a tolerance for booze and body bags.
You got a body in these? Well, it's not a fried anus, I'll tell you what.
Find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and most other podcast apps by searching Martinis and the Macabre.
And then sit back and laugh at the worst the world has to offer.
Cheers!
So the alterations to the lore, what does bother you about that most?
I think Stormwind still being alive, that needed to be burned. It feels like they only really did half of the first war, because the orcs did suffer a little bit of. Actually, no, they didn't. They didn't have any setbacks. They just kind of ran through Stormwind real quickly in their war campaign, and that's when they doubled up to Lordaeron. The Alliance did. That's when the formation of the actual Alliance happened.
Right. In the original history, again, we need to
Correct.
make sure we reference that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's that part. As I said, it doesn't feel like the city is in any kind of peril in the movie.
Yeah, it's just that the orcs are capturing more people to fuel the fire for the portal to be opened up to bring the rest of the horde.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's like they're trying to be cautious about, you know, this new threat, and obviously they want to protect themselves from it, but it doesn't feel as much like a threat as it could have been. Like if Stormwind was actually in danger in the film.
Yeah, I don't know. Stormwind was fine. They were really gonna. I think they would have been fine anyway.
Yeah. Now, did you see it? Odd timing that we're doing this, but the director Duncan Jones actually just spoke out on Twitter this week about where he would have taken this if it had gone into a full trilogy.
I'm glad you brought that up because I have that little tweet screenshot in my phone. I was going to bring it up later. But yeah, he was going to set up basically the book Lord of the Clans, which is Thrall's story of being gladiator fighting for a guy named Blackmore, who was kind of a dick. And but the main difference from that is Duncan Jones said he would run into a Tauren. There's no Taurens in the book. But the Tauren would set up the third film where Thrall travels to, I guess, Kalimdor at this time, or
Right.
whatever they want to call it in the movie, and sets up Orgrimmar.
So basically, it becomes Thrall's story if you follow a trilogy, which I find interesting because you said it almost felt like they did the first half of a book here, and it would have been interesting to have seen the orc forces move on Stormwind, and instead we would have switched gears entirely and focused on Thrall instead of the sacking of Stormwind.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they took the first half of the first book and they're like, okay, this is good. We'll just take Thrall's story now, and then we'll move to Warcraft 3, and then we're good. So it would have been ultimately a fairly rushed story, in my opinion, because there's so much juicy stuff in the middle of all that you're going to be missing out on.
Now, Jones has been vocal in the past about difficulties making this movie because essentially it was making a movie by committee because he had to keep the producers happy, but he had to keep Blizzard happy. And I feel like you can see that on the screen. I love Duncan Jones's style, and I almost feel like it's absent from this movie. Like it's kind of on par with like Kenneth Branagh doing Thor. Like here, let's take this lauded, critically acclaimed director and shove him in a Marvel movie where he's going to be constrained by the rules set by Marvel. And I almost feel like that's what happened here with Duncan Jones is it's as if his own style had to be restricted by what was needed by Blizzard or by whoever else.
So what you're saying is we need a Kevin Feige Warcraft, and then we're good.
No, that is not what I'm saying. I guess I'm saying it could have been almost any other director as well. I mean, not that I'm saying. I'm sure the way the orcs are presented, and as we talked about right at the beginning, that we do relate to them, that we do feel emotion for them, that they are so expressive. I'm sure that's because of Jones.
Yeah, definitely. I honestly think the orcs are the strongest part of the film just as a whole, even if the story is a little inconsistent with what fans probably wanted it to be, but still, the orcs are definitely 2 thumbs up from me.
So going back to my question about what from the lore bothered you, here's my little nitpick of the movie.
Shoot.
The one thing that bothered me the most, and it's a tiny thing, is when Khadgar goes off, you know, he's got to take his findings to the Kirin Tor, and so he goes off to the floating city of Dalaran.
Oh, man, that hurt my soul so bad.
Okay, so listeners who don't know Warcraft lore, at this point in Warcraft lore, Dalaran is not a floating city. It is firmly on the ground in the Alterac Mountains. It is later in the city's history that the mages turn it into a floating city. So he shouldn't have been going to a floating city. It's a cool shot, but it completely and totally doesn't fit narratively. And yes, I'm the actually guy now.
Well, I mean, Dalaran doesn't even take off until after the Second War, until the middle of the Third War. Well, after the Third War too. After Arthas is burned through Quel'Tha Loss and goes to Dalaran to get whatever he needed to get there. I don't want to get too nerdy into the lore and stuff, but Dalaran closes off completely and has spell shields up and stuff after they get burned through by Arthas and the undead.
Right. And they don't move the city from on the ground until they start moving towards Northrend, until the players and the characters and all that move their eye to Northrend to take on Arthas, who isn't even alluded to in this story.
Right, exactly. And they only go because there's a lot of magical presence up there because of the blue dragons, but that's more nerdy stuff that people probably aren't super interested in right now.
So the floating city really bothered me just because that's not where it should be at this point in time.
Right, just out of principle, it should be deep in the ground, well placed, and just ride through on a horse. But I mean, flying around a griffin's pretty cool too, I guess. So that's what works, I guess, for it.
Well, and there was some trivia that I was reading that was saying he shouldn't even been flying around on a griffin because griffins weren't brought in until the Second War or something like that. And I was like, okay, that's too nerdy for me. That's where
If you want to get specific, it's the wild hammer dwarves of the Airy Peak that have tamed the griffins and stuff that get called into war and during the Second War.
Exactly. I'm nodding and smiling at this point because you've definitely gone too nerdy for me.
Hey man, when you talk about something you've been passionate about for almost decades at this point, you get a little nerdy.
Yeah, and that's why I feel like I made the comment earlier about, feeling like there were moments that are thrown in for fan service, like seeing little Varian. Like, I'm almost surprised they didn't throw a little Jaina in when he goes to visit the Kirin Tor.
I'm so glad they didn't, though.
But that would have been a little moment of fan service. I mean, hell, you have the moment of fan service early on in the film when they're riding to Goldshire to find the king, which, by the way, why the hell is the king in Goldshire?
All the ERP, the Moonglade server, or Moonguard.
But they are riding there and they pass over the bridge and the Murloc is there and does the little sound effect, That's total fan service. And I loved it. They had to throw that in because they knew their built-in audience was going to feel the way you just mentioned, which is when you're passionate about something. This comes out in 2016. Warcraft's been out for over 10 years. People have been passionate about this for a really long time.
Yeah, not only that, but Murloc are like the bane of most everyone's existence who's played the game. If you've played that game, you know that noise, and you know you're about to be really annoyed for the next 3 or 4 minutes.
Well, and it was even worse and I find it really interesting that you're saying that because it was even worse back in classic days.
Oh, absolutely.
Like the Murlocs got nerfed in the Cataclysm is my comment, because they used to, when you heard that sound, you very likely were getting ready to hit on a corpse run, not because they necessarily were powerful, but because they were medium power, but there was a ton of them.
Oh yeah, if you heard that noise, you looked around, you saw at least 2 or 3 of them running at you, maybe more.
And now you see 2 or 3 of them running towards you, but you can kill them pretty easily. But so, yeah, but I loved that little moment. So what's your favorite kind of fan service moment of this movie?
Fan service. Let's see here. Maybe the warlords themselves, the unnamed orcs in the background, like Kargath, Bladefist, and Hellscream, and I don't really have anybody else. Well, Blackhand, I guess.
How do you feel about Blackhand's portrayal?
He probably could have been a little more warlord-like. He seemed too nice, quote unquote.
Yeah, I didn't realize he's voiced and was performed by Clancy Brown.
I love Clancy Brown.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I can spot Clancy Brown pretty quickly. I can recognize his voice. When he showed up in season 1 of Mandalorian, it was like I instantly recognized him. I had no idea that was who was behind Blackhand.
Or Macbeth from the Gargoyles cartoon.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I just watched Starship Troopers like a couple of nights ago, too. I was like, I love this dude. He's such a cool guy. He's got a great voice.
And I first met him through Highlander, where he's, the big bad, and I just love him there. I love him in Starship Troopers, too. But I almost feel the one side of the orcs that I feel like kind of got the shaft we do relate to them. We do connect with them. Some of their lore gets switched around a little bit. You're right. Their deaths, especially, are different than they are in the original lore. But the Mak'gora is just ridiculous in the movie. Both of them. Because it's almost, you talked about how they're honorable people, and neither one of them is done with honor.
I liked the one between Durotan and Gul'dan because it showed Durotan's side, how honorable and noble he is, and he's trying to show the rest of the Horde this monster that Gul'dan has become, and Gul'dan is just cheating left and right by draining his soul and stuff. At first he starts out pretty, one-on-one punching and stuff until he realizes that Durotan is probably going to kill him in a straight-up fist fight.
That's the other thing that kind of bothers me about this movie, is when Gul'dan pulls off his robes there, and he's kind of ripped.
It doesn't bug me that much. I mean, just the orcs in general, they are a very, very peak physically fit race just in general by make. It'd be like the guy from Game of Thrones, the Mountain, to be saying like, oh, that guy, he's just a fat blob or whatever, even though he is that big, he's still going to be pretty muscular and strong.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's like kind of my comparison there, I guess.
I guess I just always expected him to be kind of withered and drained underneath his robes, and instead it's like, oh, he's kind of ripped. Okay, that's an interesting take.
Well, if we want to get more into the nerdiness of it, he probably hasn't been too corrupted by the Fel yet, so he probably still maintains a lot of his physical peak prowess. Plus, he does have the Fel going through him anyway, so that's going to give him a little bit of a physical edge too. Kind of like steroids. Just kind of thinking of it that way, like he just took a lot of steroids before he started fighting.
Yeah, I mean, that obviously, that definitely shows the characterization of your players. When one is trying to be honorable because this is an honorable battle, and Gul'dan is not, he's cheating, it definitely then displays who he is. But then you have the second Mak'gora later on with Lothar, which I'm not sure why they would do that with Lothar, but okay.
It was for the film, I think. I don't believe that would even be a thing that happens with orcs and humans at this point in the war.
Right, that's what I'm saying, is it seems weird that they go back to that device with a human when I don't believe they would do that with a human in their culture. And then it's another example of, oh, let's cheat.
Right, the slide under with the sword and the groin, like, oh, come on.
Well, and then I got to thinking, I can only think of one Mak'gora we've had presented through Warcraft's history that didn't involve cheating.
Which one's that? I don't remember.
The Thrall Garrosh fight, and there are people who contend that Thrall cheated in it because he used his shamanic powers.
Yeah,
I don't think he cheated. I don't think he cheated.
I don't know, man. Lightning is pretty suspect.
So I guess if that one is cheating too, then everyone we've gotten has been cheating.
Ulterior motives.
Yeah. So then it kind of breaks the idea that it's a honorable battle.
Maybe that in itself is what kind of makes the orcs what they are, is even though they are that noble and honorable, that the stuff that decides their leaders is actually kind of fixed.
Yeah. All right, what else do you want to chat about that we haven't hit on?
I don't know. Let's see here. How did you like the look of Gul'dan? Did you like the warlords of Draenor with all the spikes coming out, or would you prefer more of a traditional no spikes in the back orc?
Well, I think the spikes coming out of his back is specifically what bothered me when he was then so buff under the robe. It's like that is what kind of gives him the appearance of this twisted, what I would assume, withered body underneath the robe. And so I liked it. I liked that appearance. To me, it fit the idea of this orc who is messing with energies that twist and corrupt and burn. I mean, the Fel energy is what ruined their planet. And he's the physical representation of that. It makes sense that his body is twisted as well.
Yeah, that's very true. That's just another instance where the lore doesn't really follow the movie between the games and the actual lore and the movie lore.
What do you mean?
Gul'dan himself is, in the actual lore, he's not very strong. He's still quite formidable, but there's no way he'd be able to win in a one-on-one fight like that without using any kind of magic, like absolutely at all.
Right.
Because he is so relying on the Fel and the magic that it possesses.
Yeah. No, I liked the way he was presented. I think he's one of the highlights of the film. Again, the orc side of things, I find it interesting that a lot of the negative reviews were critical of just how effects laden the orcs were, but I found them to be the better part of the movie as far as presentation goes, as far as emotion goes.
You think it just maybe could have been a detachment from them being CGI characters as opposed to maybe live action costumed orcs, like humans in general?
Maybe. As I said, I wouldn't, if I had been directing the film, first of all, it would have been a very different movie because I'm not a professional director. But if I wouldn't have chosen to go the CG route with the orcs. I think I would have gone practical.
Like Lord of the Rings Uruk-hai?
Right. And that would have made it very different. So,
that could have worked out too, I think. I think me and Alex actually discussed that when we first saw it, is that they could have probably pulled off like a more Uruk-hai look if they didn't want the CGI. But the CGI still worked out really well, I believe.
Well, and the Uruk-hai are supposed to be more savages, so you want to avoid that. They needed to present an orc who looked brutal, but at the same time has intelligence and has emotion. And I feel like the way they did it worked in that regard.
Very true. Yeah, for sure. Agreed.
All right, well, let's head into the end credits here. Got a couple of games before we're done. First up is The Algorithm Says. These are a variety of movies that various algorithms say you will like because you liked Warcraft. Oddly, and maybe kind of reaffirming what I just said about the movie not having Duncan Jones's style, other Duncan Jones movies didn't appear on this list because I totally would have left them in if they did.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, and as a lot of these lists, you can quickly see the connections or maybe not. But so this is kind of a lightning round. What do you like? What do you not like? What do you not see? How the hell it's connected to this? That kind of thing.
Yeah, this is what I'm here for.
All right. So first up, Prince of Persia.
I did not see it. Jake Gyllenhaal, whatever, at this point in his career. So,
I didn't think it was that bad. Obviously it's another video game adaptation, but it wasn't great by any means, but I probably Warcraft is a better video game adaptation.
Okay.
All right. Clash of the Titans, the 2010 remake.
That's the one with Sam
Worthington. Yeah.
Okay. I saw that one. A lot of the stuff was okay about it. Overall, it was like fine, I guess.
Yeah. My comment when it came out was that, the original 80s Clash of the Titans needs a remake. This wasn't it.
Right. It'd be like if they decided to take Jason and the Argonauts and just kind of up the graphics a little bit.
Yeah. All right. Assassin's Creed.
I did not see it.
Me neither. I just know it's a video game adaptation.
I think the reason I didn't see it is because people were like, yeah, there's not really a whole lot of connection to the game itself other than the name itself.
Yeah, that's what I heard. It had decent parts to it, but I haven't seen it yet. And I'm not in a rush. All right, moving away from video game adaptations, The Great Wall.
Did not see that. I think Alex ended up watching it and said it was a passable movie. I just don't worry about this one.
Okay. Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters.
Isn't that pretty new?
No, this is an older one. You're thinking of Gretel and Hansel, which just came out.
Oh, how could I get the two confused?
Right, I know, right? You savage. No, this is Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters. It's Jeremy Renner and Gemma Arterton from 2013.
Yeah, that's probably going to be a pass from me.
Oh, it's fun.
Is it like 3 beers fun or?
Yes.
Oh no.
maybe 4. Not really seeing the connection, but okay. All right, moving on. The Mummy.
Oh, Brendan Fraser?
No, the 2017 Tom Cruise
God,
one.
Why you gotta do this to me? I didn't see the Tom Cruise one, but I love the Brendan Fraser one. That one's fun.
Yeah, I love the Brendan Fraser. Let's talk about the Brendan Fraser one because I love that one.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why this is. I don't know how Warcraft is pulling up Hansel and Gretel and the Mummy, but it is. So.
Well, the Hansel and Gretel, I can get that being like the more fantasy aspect to it.
Yeah, maybe.
But Tom Cruise has nothing to do with Warcraft.
No, thankfully. Let's keep it that way, please. All right, Edge of Tomorrow.
Loved it. Didn't you do a review on that one?
We did an episode on that one, yeah.
Yeah, I love that movie. It's such a great time. Again, Tom Cruise. What are you doing here, Tom Cruise? Get out of here.
Yeah. I don't know. Ready Player One.
Oh man, that's the only other movie I own on iTunes besides this movie, and I love it so much. I think my favorite thing about Ready Player One is seeing a Jim Raynor at the beginning of it.
A what?
A Jim Raynor from StarCraft and his power
Oh,
suit.
right.
Oh,
Okay.
man. And a couple Tracer cameos. Just
Yes.
the amount of nostalgia in that movie with the video game characters is just awesome. I love that movie a lot.
I read the book several years before the movie was came out, and my problem with the book was it felt like it was hitting you in the face with nostalgia. Like every page had some reference to it, and that works really well in a movie where it can be in the background, as opposed to a book where it's just shoved in your face.
Right. I never read the books or anything, but I saw the movie in the theaters and was blown away by it. Once again, it's another fantastically done CGI world that pushes the bar again.
Yeah. All right, John Carter.
No, never. That's Disney, right?
It is, yes.
Yeah, that's one I never saw.
My guess is it's a book adaptation, and this is a video game adaptation. So,
yeah.
And then finally, Ender's Game.
I saw it. I saw that one in the theaters too, I believe, and it was fine. Another book adaptation.
Yeah, I didn't like it.
It was fine as a movie, but as a series, it probably would have been better. But it's not the worst thing of this list for sure.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We always end with a pop quiz, 4 multiple choice questions based on the movie. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right. Number 1. With the movie based on a video game, another filmmaker expressed interest in taking on the project, to which he was told by Blizzard Entertainment, "We will not sell the movie rights to you, especially not to you." Who was rejected from making a Warcraft movie? A. Michael Bay, B. Sam Raimi, C. Zack Snyder, or D. Uwe Boll?
Was it D?
Uwe Boll, it was. Yes.
Yeah, I read through that's the fun, the IMDb a little bit. That was like the first one that I saw.
Yeah, Sam Raimi was actually set to direct it at one point, but Uwe Boll, who has done film adaptations of Blood Rain and Postal and In the Name of the King, and notoriously was making bad movies because of German tax cutoffs and tax write-offs and stuff.
Yikes.
Yeah. In the days of my old podcast, I actually got to interview him. It was very interesting listening to how evasive he was about questions about the financial aspect of filmmaking.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I can understand that from him.
Number 2, while the film is full of digital effects, one sequence was surprisingly done practically. What was it? A, the baby orc floating down the river. B, Medivh burning Khadgar's research notes. C, Khadgar's glowing tattoo. Or D, the birth of the baby orc.
B.
Yep, Medivh burning Khadgar's research notes was done practically, which explains a lot more as to why Khadgar is so freaked out when everything's catching fire.
Yeah, he reacts so well to that scene, and there's that one in the back that stays on fire for a little bit longer than it probably should have.
Yeah. All right, number 3, musicians Idina Menzel, Debbie Gibson, Julie Delpy, and Leighton Meester were all contenders for which role in the movie? A, Garona, B, Draka, C, Queen Teria Wynn, or D, Elodie?
Aladi, maybe?
Aladi, sorry, yeah, Aladi.
That's what I'm going to guess, D.
Oh, that's your guess? No, they were all contenders for Garona.
Oh, really?
We should mention, I can't believe we missed it, but Aladi is played by Glenn Close.
Yep.
What the hell?
That's just one of those random cameo or guest appearances. You're like, wait, who was that again? Rewind that. Yeah. And then you see your chin, you're like, oh my gosh, that is Cruella DeVille.
Yeah. I can think of about a dozen other roles I'd referenced before 101 Dalmatians, but okay. All right, last question. Warcraft legend Chris Metzen helped with the story of the film and then put in an on-screen cameo as who? A, an orc at the first Mak'gora. B, the human who finds the baby orc. C, a turbaned perfume vendor in Stormwind.
C,
or
sorry,
D,
I'm gonna stop you.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a deleted scene. It's so kind of a weird scene, but it fits him really well.
Well, I had to go as detailed on the answer compared to the other ones because I was like, there's no way he's going to know this.
Oh, no, I'm surprised I didn't get the last one, the Alidai question or answer that was wrong.
Yeah, I want to know why they why they were considering a bunch of musicians for Garona.
Was she going to have a musical number or something maybe in the middle? Or
Okay, now I'm sorry I asked. All right, man, where can people find you? Anything you want to promote? Anything like that?
Not particularly. If you want to find me, you can find me on Fairbanks server for Classic WoW, and the guild Here Be Monsters as Grootsy or Drugus.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and thanks for giving me an excuse to watch Warcraft again. It's as much as I've berated it here or there throughout the conversation, it's not that bad a movie. It is fun.
It definitely has its moments of pleasure and just silly fun, especially during the fight sequences. Those are really well done, and the CGI is just really great.
Yeah. So thanks for giving me a reason to watch it again.
Hey, no problem. Time for me to log out and then log back into WoW.
So that does it for this week, but you can keep the conversation going throughout the week on social media, share your thoughts about Warcraft, or maybe tell me about a movie you'd like to come on the show and talk about. You can find me at Talon Hess on Twitter, or the show at Have Not Seen This on Twitter, on Facebook, we're at Have Not Seen This Podcast, or email me at havenotseentthis@gmail.com. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the show so you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes, including next week's episode, which, well, as I said, I don't have it picked out yet because I let myself get behind on recordings, but there will be an episode, and it will be a movie of some sort. This podcast is available through all major podcast sources. Positive ratings and reviews are always welcome, as is just sharing the podcast with a friend and spreading the love. And if you like World of Warcraft or other Blizzard games, be sure to check out Citizens of Azeroth, a World of Warcraft podcast, also available through all major podcast sources. Special thanks to Chris Talent for our wonderful theme song, and thanks to Luke for providing this week's conversation. Until next week, I'm Rafe Telsch, and this has been Have Not Seen This. Be kind to each other.